The night my mother locked me out of her house, she didn't even look angry. She looked relieved, like she had finally taken out the trash. And the craziest part? She thought I'd beg to come back. She had no idea I was about to take everything she built and legally dismantle it piece by piece. Before I tell you how I went from standing in the rain with a suitcase to watching her empire collapse in a courtroom, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Because stories like this, they're real. And they remind you exactly how powerful you are when you stop accepting disrespect. I used to think my mom was just tough. That's what she called herself. Tough. Disciplined. A woman who didn't tolerate weakness. Growing up, I believed her. When she criticized my clothes, my friends, my body, my voice, I told myself she was preparing me for the real world. But the real world never hurt me the way she did. My dad left when I was 12. Mom turned that into a story about survival. "It's you and me against the world," she'd say, squeezing my shoulder like we were soldiers in the same army. I worked 2 jobs in college to help with bills because she said the mortgage was killing her. I sent money home even after I graduated. Every promotion I got, she'd smile tight and say, "Don't get cocky. Remember who sacrificed for you." I remembered. I remembered every dinner she skipped so I could eat. I remembered her crying over bills. I remembered thinking I owed her my life. So when she said she needed me to move back home temporarily to help stabilize things, I packed my apartment in 2 weeks. I broke my lease. I told my boyfriend we needed space. I walked back into my childhood bedroom like I was coming home to save us. The house looked different though. New marble countertops. A brand new SUV in the driveway. Designer handbags on the kitchen island. I remember laughing awkwardly and saying, "Wow, things don't look that bad." She didn't laugh. "You think this pays for itself?" she snapped. "Do you know how hard I work to maintain appearances? Clients expect a certain lifestyle. Maintain appearances." That was the first crack. Over the next few months, I noticed things that didn't add up. She'd complain about being broke, but host expensive dinner parties. She'd scream at me for using too much electricity, but book weekend spa trips. And whenever I asked simple questions about the mortgage or bills, her face would go cold. "Why are you interrogating me?" she'd say. "After everything I've done for you?" Guilt. That was her favorite weapon. One night, I came home early from work and heard her in the living room on speakerphone. She didn't know I was there. I heard my name. "She's back home now," Mom said, her voice light. "It's perfect timing. I can move some assets around. If anything happens, it'll fall under her income bracket, not mine." My stomach dropped. I stood frozen in the hallway, my keys still in my hand. The man on the other end laughed softly. "Smart. Using family keeps it clean." Using family. I felt like I'd been slapped. I walked into the room before I could stop myself. Using me for what? Her face drained of color for half a second. Then it hardened. "For God's sake, stop eavesdropping," she hissed, quickly ending the call. "What assets? What falls under my income?" My voice was shaking, but I forced myself to stand tall. She stood up slowly, smoothing her blouse like I was the one being dramatic. "You wouldn't understand. This is adult business. I am an adult." She laughed at that. Actually laughed. "If you were, you'd realize everything I do is for us. For this family. You think this house stays standing without strategy." Strategy. That word echoed in my head all night. The next week, envelopes started arriving in my name. Credit card statements I never opened. Loan documents I never signed. Business filings listing me as a financial guarantor. I confronted her again, papers shaking in my hands. "Mom, what is this?" She didn't even blink. "You live here. You benefit from this lifestyle. It's only fair you contribute." I didn't agree to this. "You don't need to agree," she snapped. "I'm your mother." That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not shuddered. Shifted. Because I realized she didn't see me as her daughter. She saw me as a resource. And resources get used. 2 nights later, after another screaming match where I refused to sign a new set of documents she shoved in my face, she dragged my suitcase to the front door. "If you're not going to support this family," she said calmly, opening the door, "then you don't get to live under my roof." It was raining. Of course it was raining. She tossed my suitcase onto the porch like it weighed nothing. "Don't come crawling back when you realize how hard the world is," she added. Then she closed the door. And as I stood there, soaked and shaking, staring at the house I helped pay for, I finally understood something with terrifying clarity. My mother had built her life on lies. And she had just made the biggest mistake of her career. She taught me to survive. She forgot she also taught me how to fight. I didn't cry right away. I stood there in the rain for a long time, staring at the door like it might magically open, like she might realize she'd gone too far and pull me back inside. That's what little girls hope for, that their mother will choose them. But the porch light clicked off. That's when it hit me. Not just the betrayal, the humiliation, the understanding that she never saw me as her child. I was leverage. I was a tax shield. I was a name she could sign under dotted lines. I dragged my suitcase down the driveway myself. That night I slept on my best friend Jenna's couch. I didn't tell her everything at first. I was embarrassed. I kept saying, "It's just a misunderstanding." Even then, part of me was still protecting my mom. But by morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Unknown numbers. Voicemails. Emails. "Miss Carter, this is regarding your outstanding balance. Ma'am, we need to verify your authorization on a business loan. Failure to respond may result in legal action." My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I opened my banking app. Accounts I didn't recognize. Credit cards maxed out. A business line of credit under my name. My credit score, the thing I worked so hard to build, had dropped over 100 points in weeks. I felt sick. I drove straight to the bank with every document I had. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the folder at the teller window. "I didn't sign these," I told the manager. "I never agreed to this." He looked at me with that polite, careful expression people use when they don't know if you're naive or lying. "The signatures match your ID on file." Of course they did. My mom had access to everything. My social security number. My old passports. Every form I'd ever filled out. I walked out of that bank in a fog. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel. I could report her. I could file fraud charges. But that meant admitting the truth out loud. That my own mother had stolen from me. I called her instead. She answered on the second ring. "What now?" "You opened accounts in my name," I said quietly. Silence. Then a sigh. "Oh my God, you're being dramatic." "Dramatic?" "They're threatening legal action." "It's temporary," she snapped. "Once the new contract's clear, I'll move things around. You just need to calm down. You forged my signature." "Don't use ugly words," she said, her voice turning icy. "I did what was necessary. You live in the real world now. Sometimes we make strategic decisions." Strategic. That word again. "You ruined my credit," I whispered. "I built your life," she shot back. "You think you got that job without the network I gave you? You think you're self-made." That was the moment the last piece of denial died. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't scared. She thought she was smarter than everyone. Untouchable. And she thought I'd stay quiet because she was my mother. I hung up without another word. That night, I didn't cry either. I researched. I pulled every credit report, every public business filing, every property record tied to her name. The more I dug, the worse it got. Shell companies. Loans stacked on top of loans. Properties leveraged 3 times over. Assets shuffled between accounts like a magic trick. And everywhere I looked, there were traces of me. My name listed as guarantor. My income attached to applications. My digital signature copied and pasted like it belonged to her. It wasn't just betrayal. It was calculated. I felt anger rise in me, but it wasn't loud. It wasn't explosive. It was cold. For years, she'd told me I was too soft, too emotional, too weak to survive without her. Sitting there in the dark, laptop glowing against my face, I realized something. I knew her systems. I knew her habits. I knew how she thought. She underestimated me because she always had. The next morning, I scheduled consultations with a forensic accountant and a fraud attorney. If she wanted to play strategy, I would too. But I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't beg. I would document. I would audit. And I would make sure that every single strategic decision she made using my name came back to her in black and white. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to make her proud. I was preparing to make her accountable. And something inside me felt steady. She threw me out like trash. Now I was about to open every drawer she'd ever locked and show the world exactly what she'd built her empire on. The first time I saw my mother look afraid, it wasn't during a screaming match. It was across a polished conference table under bright office lights, with a forensic accountant sliding a thick folder toward her and saying calmly, "Ma'am, we need to discuss the pattern of fraudulent transfers tied to your daughter's identity." I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The weeks leading up to that meeting were brutal. Filing the police report felt like swallowing glass. Writing my own mother's name under suspect made my hands tremble. I sat in my car afterward and finally cried, not because I felt guilty, but because I was grieving the mother I thought I had. The illusion died slowly. The investigation moved faster than I expected. Once the attorneys started pulling threads, everything unraveled. The shell companies weren't as airtight as she believed. The strategic asset transfers? Sloppy. The copied signatures? Traceable. My digital footprints proved I was at work during several transactions made by me. And when creditors realized I had filed an identity theft claim, they froze the accounts immediately. Her accounts. Properties she'd leveraged were flagged. Lines of credit suspended. Partnerships questioned. Investors started asking for documentation she couldn't provide without implicating herself. The empire built on appearance began to crack. She called me non-stop once she realized what was happening. "How could you do this to me?" she screamed in one voicemail. "I am your mother." I listened to that message 3 times. And for the first time in my life, I heard it clearly. Not love. Not hurt. Control. I called her back once. Just once. "You did this to yourself," I said quietly. "You're destroying this family," she snapped. "You used me," I replied. "You forged my name. You gambled my future to protect your image. It was temporary. Su vas my trust." Silence. Then she tried the guilt. After everything I sacrificed. I closed my eyes and felt something shift again. Not anger this time. Not sadness. Freedom. "You didn't sacrifice for me," I said softly. "You invested in me. And when you thought the return was high enough, you cashed me out." She hung up on me. A month later, formal charges were filed. Fraud. Identity theft. Financial misrepresentation. Civil suits from lenders followed. Investors pulled out. The SUV disappeared from the driveway. The house, the one I stood outside of in the rain, went into foreclosure after assets were frozen and emergency refinancing fell through. Bankruptcy wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fireworks. It was paperwork. Stacks and stacks of paperwork. And I watched her walk into that courtroom without the designer bags. Without the polished smile. Without the illusion. For years, she told me the world would eat me alive without her. But there she was, alone at the defense table, realizing the world doesn't tolerate lies when there's evidence. After the hearing, she tried one last time. In the hallway, she grabbed my arm. "You've made your point," she whispered harshly. "Drop it. Fix this." I gently pulled my arm away. "I am fixing it," I said. And I walked away. Not shaking. Not crying. Just done. The charges stuck. The bankruptcy was finalized. My credit was restored after months of legal back and forth. It wasn't easy. It wasn't instant. But it was clean. I moved into a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy. Just mine. The first night I slept there, I expected to feel lonely. Instead, I felt safe. People always imagine revenge as loud. Explosive. Dramatic. Mine was quiet. It was boundaries. Documentation. Refusing to protect someone who harmed me just because we share blood. Do I miss the idea of my mom? Sometimes. But I don't miss walking on eggshells. I don't miss being a tool in someone else's strategy. She threw me out like trash. But trash doesn't rebuild its credit score. Trash doesn't outmaneuver financial manipulation. Trash doesn't sit in courtrooms and tell the truth under oath. I wasn't weak. I was conditioned. And once I broke that conditioning, she lost the only thing keeping her empire standing: access to me. If you're listening to this and you're stuck between loyalty and self-respect, hear me when I say this. Protecting someone who's destroying you is not love. Silence is not strength. And accountability is not betrayal. Sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't ruining someone's life. It's refusing to let them ruin yours. If this story hit you in the chest, if you've ever been underestimated, manipulated, or told you'd never survive without someone, subscribe to this channel. Because here we tell the truth. And we remind each other that walking away can be the most powerful move you'll ever make.